everybody. This is Lori Rose with Lori Rose Holistic, and I'm here guest podcasting for the Weight Free Wellness podcast. And as you guys can tell, usually my background is super cute, but we're moving in a week, and so things are kind of chaotic right now, but I am excited to interrupt the chaos and have an amazing conversation with Greg Peterson from Urban Farm University. And in case you guys missed it, he interviewed me a couple weeks ago, and I'll put that link in the podcast notes for this interview. But now I'm excited to get to listen to his story and his mission, because Greg and I's missions align very much, and he has this amazing both online and in-person resource to spread urban farming. And so I'm just going to turn it over to him. Welcome, Greg. I'm so excited you were able to join us.
Hey, thanks for having me.
Of course.
It's so exciting that you're moving.
I know. Yeah. I'm getting some acreage too. I tell people I'm moving to land. They're like, how much? I'm like, 2 acres. They're like, just 2 acres? I was like, well, I have 0.17 right now. So that's huge.
Yeah, exactly. Exactly. Wow, cool. I often get that. I live at the urban farm in north central Phoenix. And so if you stood up on the roof of my house and looked 50 miles in each direction, you'd see houses. Yeah. So I am literally in the middle of the 5th biggest city in the country. And so when I tell people I'm with the urban farm, they go, oh, wow, cool. How many acres do you have? And I kind of giggle and say, well, I have 1/4 of an acre. I have about 14,000 square feet. That's 80 feet wide and about 160 feet deep. So that's the size of my property. And on that property, I have solar panels on the roof. We've got rainwater and gray water harvesting. We've got about 80 fruit trees on the property. And the entire landscape is edible, or it supports edibles.
So great. Yeah. And I think people just don't realize how much you can do if you really put your land to efficient use. Because my 0.17 acres, it's like 18 fruit trees and grapes and blueberries and blackberries and just any fruit or vegetable you could want to eat and grow in this region. So really incredible what you can do with a little bit of land.
And planning.
Yeah, absolutely.
A little bit of land and planning.
Yep. So that's exactly what Urban Farm is here to do, right? So tell us a little bit about Urban Farm University and your story and your mission and how you came to be.
Wow. So I am 56 years old. I may not look that, but I am 56 years old. And when I was in the 7th grade, I wrote a paper on how we were overfishing the oceans. And that was 1974-ish. So I knew something was wrong with the way we were living on the planet back then. And I can even track it back to like 1969, 1970, when I got my first fish aquarium and I started, raising fish. And that was always going to be my track, was I was going to go out and start a fish farm somewhere and raise fish for people to eat. So I've always been interested in aquaculture. They call it aquaponics now, or fish-powered gardens. That has always just fascinated me. So that was 1974, and I was still, I was just coming into high school then. But if you fast forward to 1991, there were multiple things that happened for me in 1991 that were pivotal moments. I had several of them. One of them was I discovered this thing called permaculture. Are you familiar with permaculture?
Oh, absolutely.
Permaculture, I like to call the art and science of working with nature. So how do we step in the flow and work with nature rather than against nature? Because we human beings, we like to fight nature, right? Yeah. I don't know why. Maybe it's because we think we know how to do it better. The late Toby Hemingway says, nature always bats last, and nature will always bat last. Mm-hmm. So I use the metaphor when I'm talking about how we fight nature. When we go tubing, you go tubing to the river, or you want to go boating, floating down a river, where do you start at? We start at the top, right? Yeah. Well, when it comes to dealing with the environment, we human beings, we start at the bottom and we try and swim upstream to fix it. And it's like, we're just beating our head against the wall when we do that. Yeah. So that's a big piece of what permaculture represented to me. Second thing that happened for me is I read a book called Ishmael.
Mm.
Ishmael by Daniel Quinn. You've read it, I can
Oh,
tell.
yes.
I have I have all of my students read Ishmael.
Yeah. So good.
It's a conversation between a gorilla and a man, and he really frames out how we came to be the dominant on the planet and what we can do about it. So we don't have to do that. So that was number 2 thing that happened in 1991. Number 3 thing that happened for me in 1991, I was really active that year. I did a workshop, a weekend workshop at Landmark Education. Now they do something called the Forum, and the Forum is a weekend workshop where it kind of breaks up your paradigm. Well, I did the advanced course at Landmark in 1991. And in the advanced course, what they do is they have you define who you are on the planet.
Mm.
And so who I created myself to be in 1991, that's what, 26 years ago. Actually, it's 26 years ago this month. Yeah, I know. Time flies, man. I created myself to be the person on the planet responsible for transforming our food system.
Love it.
Who knows if I'll ever make it? But the cool thing for me is that's what I get to wake up to every morning.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't see it as a burden. I see it as this, oh my God, this is what I get to do. I just got chills. Honestly, I just got chilled. I get to be this guy that's out there doing culture-changing work around food on the planet. And then there was one more thing that like is the icing on the top of the cake that happened in 1991. And that is a friend of mine went sailing in the South Pacific.
Mm.
And they anchored at a small island. And they went on this island looking for a grocery store. And the people kind of looked at him like, go pick your own.
Yeah.
So Walt came back with that story. And it was like, for me, that was a mind-blowing topping on icing on the top of this cake. It's like, oh, right. Food doesn't come from a grocery store. And one of the things that I've discovered in all of this, in permaculture and all of this, is that there's only one place. I'm going to ask you this question. There's only one place on the planet where lack lives. Only one. Only one. Where do you think it is?
Where lack lives?
L-A-C-K, where lack lives. This notion of lack, where does it exist at?
In our heads?
Exactly. Exactly. Because when I look at nature, when I look at the fruit trees in my yard and the abundance of food that happens in my yard and the abundance that's in nature, there's no lack there.
Yeah.
So we as human beings take that concept and it's like, oh my gosh, I got to hold on to whatever. And we are the ones that do bad to it.
Absolutely.
So I really encourage people to step into their prosperity consciousness and their garden. And, you know, it's when you do that, the happy shows up. I mean, I'm like this every day.
Yeah.
Aren't I, Heidi? Yeah, she's shaking her head. Yeah, you're like this every day. I am. I'm like this every day. And I like to get out in the garden every day. And this is what it does for me.
Mm-hmm.
This is what it does for me. Okay, so now we're in 1991. Fast forward to 2001. So I was born in 61.
Mm-hmm.
I had a bunch happen in 91.
Mm-hmm.
And there's something that was really pivotal that happened for me in 2001. I had gone back to school. I went back to school late in life. I never stopped learning along the way, but I didn't really like college until I got back in 1999. And then I was all lit up. I was 39 years old and I was lit up about learning that way.
Yes.
So in 2001, I had this class, and what he had us do was write a mission and vision for our lives. Again, you can see this theme that keeps happening, right? And what I realized in writing my mission and vision for that class, I still have that paper, by the way, is that I was already doing what I wanted to do. And that was to teach people, because by 2001, I was regularly teaching people how to grow their own food. And that was to teach people how to grow their own food. So at that point, I moved into the urban farm, this house in 1989. So that's 28 years ago. By 2001, I had gardens here. I had fruit trees here. I was doing all of that stuff. And I realized in writing that paper that, oh, okay. So the urban farm is a place. That's when it got named. And actually in 2001, I started opening it up for tours. And so in 2001 and 2002 and 2003, the first Saturday of about 8 months of the year, I would have an urban farm tour here at the urban farm, where I would open up the front yard and backyard for people to come in and see my environmental showcase home. That's what I call it.
Mm-hmm.
And there were times that nobody showed up. And I would pack it up. Literally, I would pack up the tent. I had this really cool tent, still have the tent. And I'd pack it up and I'd put it away. And then I'd do it the next weekend or the next month. And fast forward, 17 years? Now when we do a tour here at the urban farm, we have to plan one on Friday. And I'm just about ready to switch over to doing 2 on Friday and 2 on Saturday.
Wow.
Because we'll get upwards of 250 people that actually come to the urban farm tour now.
Ooh, that's incredible.
Yeah. So there's this level of interest, especially, this is what I'm so excited about, especially with millennials. According to, and I haven't located this exactly, but I've read it a couple of times. According to the National Gardening Association, there in 2015, I think it was, there were 6 million new gardeners. 5 million of them were millennials.
That's amazing.
That gives me so much hope for the future of our food.
So let's dive into that just a minute, because I think some people may hear your story, and you've been lit on fire for the food system since 7th grade. Well,
Yeah.
what about these millennials, or even people in different generations who they went their whole childhood not learning anything about gardening? How is it possible for someone who has zero experience to become analogous to the urban farm? Is that possible for someone to do?
Yes, absolutely. So let me tell you a story about that. So, they say the sincerest form of flattery is being copied, right? In 2001, I was the only one doing chicken classes here in Phoenix. There are 4.5 million people in Phoenix. I was the only one doing chicken classes. I was the only one doing garden tours. I was the only one doing the classes around town that I was doing. There are literally dozens of urban farms now that open up on a regular basis to show off their farm, using the same model that I suggest they use, and that's make the tour free and put a donation basket at the door.
Yeah.
And people will be inspired to drop money in the donation basket. Use that model. It is a very cool one. And the truth of the matter is, if you know something about gardening and you're doing a garden tour at your house, you know way more than the people that are coming to look at you, to look at your space, right? So, and you don't have to worry about knowing everything. I don't know everything. I've been doing this for 40 plus years and I don't know everything. And it's like, you know what? Somebody asked me a question that I don't know. It's like, yeah, you know what? I have no idea about that.
Yeah.
Google.
Yeah.
Do an internet search, right? So really the big thing here is choosing. Choose what you do, and fully choose it. I, in 1991, chose the guy on the planet responsible for transforming our global food system. Who takes on a task like that? That's the work of a crazy man.
I love it. And another part of the story that you said that I liked is how when you first started, people wouldn't show up and you didn't give up. So
Right.
What part of you helped you persevere through those empty weekends and make you think, well, maybe this was my vision, but maybe the world just doesn't want this, or maybe the world doesn't need this? What told you to keep going, and how did you know that was a worthwhile issue?
Yeah, good question. I am just like that. So mom has known me for 56 years, right? And I'm on a conversation with her on the phone yesterday, and I said, Mom, you know what one of the secrets to my success is? And she says, she laughs and she says, yeah, you don't give up. You just don't give up. So, and even in the face of, in 2004, in fact, I've got a magazine cover in my office. I've got a magazine cover, and they put me on the cover of Scottsdale magazine. And I was sitting cross-legged in my front yard with corn growing in back of me. And the headline on the magazine was, "Would you want this guy for your neighbor?" They were kind of poking fun at me. And this, I think it was 2007, so 10 years ago. And that's fine as far as I'm, you know, it was a well-written article, but they were kind of making fun of the food movement. Not so much anymore. I'm the cool dude now.
Yeah.
And you know, I just don't give up.
Mm-hmm.
Here's what I know. Everybody needs to eat. And if we're going to be healthy, everybody needs to eat healthy food. Mm-hmm. End of story, right?
Yeah.
So how do we, you know, how can you bring healthy food to your neighborhoods and to your communities? And there is so many things that you can do, even if you're not growing any food. You know, so there's growing food. So you can, you know, while I was at Arizona State University as a student, so from 1999 to about 2005, I truck farmed the property here. So basically what I did is I grew food in the front and backyard, and once a week I'd get up very early on a Wednesday morning, you know, like 4 o'clock, and I'd go out and I'd package the stuff that I had for sale, the flowers and the food, and I would take it to the market. And, you know, back then I'd make, you know, $300-400 a week. I had made arrangements with a restaurateur here in town that anything that I had left over, I took to her at the end of the day. And then, which the market ran from like 8 until noon. So then I would go afternoon, I'd go to see Susan at the Calico Cow and deliver what I had left over, and she'd buy me lunch. You know, so there's that. I have some friends that actually make agreements with other farmers around town to buy their stuff and take it to the farmers markets. Mm. There's that. There's, you know, there's community gardens. There's so many different things that, you know, that somebody can do to, you know, plug into the local food system and, you know, create healthy food. It's just, what's your passion? Where is it? What do you want to do? So,
and I think that's so important to point out is, one, the part of your story where, okay, you have this inherent persistence, and I can totally relate to that. But
yeah.
What do we do to inspire people to keep that persistence? And I think just remembering, you know, your story as an example, don't give up before the miracle. And like, just keep remembering these people who
I like that.
You went from 0 to 200 twice a day, you know, but it took some years. And I think it's the years where people kind of forget about their mission. But your mission had so been directly stated, and you were in tune with it, that you knew it was worth it. And another thing that I think you mentioned that's so important is that a lot of people feel like, well, if I don't have this land or I don't have these skills, then I can't really contribute to this thing I'm passionate about. So they just stay verbally passionate instead of actively passionate.
Right.
And you just pointed out a lot of ways you can contribute to the local whole food movement without having to be a gardener or without having to be a farmer. You can help those people and connect those people.
Yeah, exactly. You know, there's and I interviewed him on my podcast at urbanfarmpodcast.com. There's an author, and I've drawn a blank on his name, and he's got the Indoor Salad Garden book. And it is a book on sprouts. And he talks all about how to make an entire salad out of, you know, different kinds of sprouts. I mean, it can be that simple to grow healthy, nutritious food for your family. And sprouts are very nutritious. So,
you know, I like that idea because I often tell people, like, most people like the harvesting part of gardening, but I just like watching the seed sprout. And once they sprout, I'm like, okay, I'm done with you. So maybe I need to be a sprouter. I need to
there you go. There you go. Here's one piece of advice I have for people. If you want to explore this, start exploring it. And don't be in my podcast. I've had over 300 episodes of our podcast. And in our podcast, I always ask the question, and you probably remember this. Can you share about a time you failed, how you overcame that failure, and what you learned from it? Everybody fails. I promise you, I have killed more plants than you ever will. Not on purpose, but that's, that's part of this learning process. Don't be afraid to fail. And, if you go try, and here's the other thing. I've been an entrepreneur for my entire life. I've had 28, 29, 30 businesses that I've started. I started a nonprofit, so on and so on. I also, when I was younger, from like the time I was 15, 16 to the time I was 25, I probably had 100 jobs. Literally, there was one that lasted for 2 hours. It's like I was at a call center, and it's like, there's no way I'm going to work at a call center. It was selling out on my heart. That's not going to happen. But after that experience, I worked at a gas station for 2 weeks. Yeah, back when they used to clean windshields and fill your tank for you, right? And after those 2 experiences, it's like, you know what? Yeah, that's not me. That's not what I'm interested in. So when you're young, you have time to take on those experiences and try them and see what's going to work for you and what's not going to work for you.
Yeah, and sadly, I think the education system, I'm part of it, so
as am I.
Yeah. I think the way it's set up is we really don't promote that as much as we should. And oftentimes I have college students have like 10 different interests and not know which way to go. And I'm like, you need to go do all of them. Go do them. Go experience each one at least for like a week or a day and see if you like doing it. Because there's things you can like learning and not like doing.
Right.
And so I think you saying like go and explore and do this and do that and do that and do that. You never know. Like you might have been passionate about the gas station thing and that would have been it. But if
exactly.
You wouldn't have known.
Yeah, exactly. Experiment a lot. And I'll tell you what, being an entrepreneur, there have been times in my life where I completed one business, closed it down, sold it, did something. And it's like, okay, now what do I do next?
Yeah.
Those are the most exciting times of my life when I get to make up what's going to happen next.
Yeah.
So the cool part of it now is I have a big enough business structure set up that when I just create new stuff now. My friends Bill and Belle and Kari and I, about 4 years ago, started something called the Great American Seed Up. And the Great American Seed Up is this once-a-year event that we do here in Phoenix, and we're working on franchising. Well, not traditional franchising. We're working on putting together a system to where other people can do it in other communities. But essentially what the event is, and I'll tell you what it does, essentially what the event is it's a place to buy amazingly priced bulk garden seeds. So we for this event, we rent a space that's about 10,000 square feet. It's a huge fellowship hall at a church. And we put up tables, and on each table, there's a popcorn bucket with a sign next to it and a scoop next to it and plastic Ziploc bags and a business card that talks about the Armenian cucumber seeds in that bucket. So for $1.25, you can get a tablespoon of Armenian cucumber seeds, which, by the way, is about 10 packets of normal seeds.
Yeah.
Of normal packets. So you're getting an amazing amount of seeds for $1.25.
Yeah.
So we designed this event so that people would have an opportunity to stock up on bulk seeds. Plus, it's an educational event. So when people come to the event, they get to take classes on how to save seeds, on how to store seeds, and how to start seeds. So essentially what we're doing with this event is we're plugging in, well, my goal was to plug in 10,000 seed banks in freezers in Phoenix.
Wow.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So when I don't hit impasses anymore where I don't have anything to do because I'm dreaming up ideas like that. But when I first started out, there were times I got fired from a job. I worked there for 11 months. I got fired from a job. It was December of 1984. He fired me on December 1st so he wouldn't have to pay me the Christmas bonus that he paid everybody, right? It was a horrendous job. It was a sales job. It was actually, for 11 months, it was one of the longest jobs that I've had in my life. And I was like, all right, what do I do here? Well, what I did was I pivoted from what I was doing to basically a laser desktop publishing business. So in 1984, the Macintosh computer came out. And in 1985, I bought a $5,000 laser printer. That was when they first came out. And I started laying out newsletters for businesses here in town, laser typesetting rather than, for those of you that don't remember, they used to typeset newspapers one line at a time.
Ooh.
With tape. It was a mess. So I was actually doing that. And it took me a few months. I lived light. So let's see, in 1984, I was no longer living at home. So I lived light. I lived in a very inexpensive apartment. And I just, I did this for people. And it was a pivot for me in my life, but it was exciting. So I just really encourage people to try something new.
Yeah, and I think that's yet another thing our culture does a pretty poor job at encouraging is, you can have a different passion today than you do tomorrow, and it's okay to make those pivots and changes. And when you have those ideas, like your seed idea or like your tour idea, do them.
Yes.
There's a reason those ideas are coming into your head, whether it lasts a year or a month or a lifetime.
So here's what I tell people about my businesses. I lost track, somewhere between 25 and 30 businesses that I've had. But here's what I tell people. Some of them last a sneeze. I gold-plated Slinkies sometime in the 90s because I thought they would make big, great boomer toys. Never got off the ground. Never got off the ground. So I had businesses that were over like that. And then I had two businesses, my current one and my software company that I ran from 1984 to 2008 or 2007, something like that, that lasted over 2 decades.
Yeah.
But it just takes experimenting.
Yeah.
Go out and play, have fun. And here's the other thing. Along the way, I delivered newspapers. I delivered pizzas. I used to work for Domino's Pizza. I'm the kind of guy, I do whatever it takes to get it done.
Yeah.
Whatever it takes. So, at 56, if something happened and I had a downtime financially, I'm not rich, but I could at least pay my bills and put a little bit aside every month. But if I had a downtime financially, I'd go out and figure out something to do.
Absolutely.
Make some money. Because the life of an entrepreneur is kind of up and down sometimes.
Mm-hmm.
But that's the fun part. For me, that's the experimental part. That's the place where the what ifs come in.
Absolutely. And as long as you make them good what ifs and roll with it, then you're good. So your seed up and your permaculture ideas, that's not the only thing you have locally. Tell us about the tree planting idea.
Tree program.
Yeah.
So locally what I have is the permaculture design course. Once a year we do a full on 72-hour permaculture design course. We're starting in about 3 weeks. We've got the Great American Seed Up, which this is our 4th annual one, and it's in about 4 weeks is when we're doing that. But then also I have a fruit tree education program, and this is my fruit tree here. Maybe you can see it. It's my fruit tree, urban farm fruit tree program.
Oh, love it.
And what I do is for free, I teach people how to successfully grow their own fruit trees in the desert. Here's the thing. Growing food is actually pretty straightforward. No matter where you live, it's easy to grow food. You don't have a brown or a black thumb, I promise. You just have to know the rules for your area. That's really the bottom line. You have to know what the rules are. Once you know what the rules are, it's easy to grow food. So what I do is we're starting here in September, and I spend September, October, and November running around town giving free classes, doing classes online. In fact, if you want to take my urban orcharding class, you can go to urbanfarm.org, and on the events page, we'll have some online webinars that you can actually take. Wherever you are in the world, you can take one of our fruit tree webinars. They're kind of slanted toward Phoenix, but you will learn a lot about growing fruit trees. And so I teach people about fruit trees, and then they can actually buy some fruit trees from us. And so the education is free. The fruit trees is where I make a living at. And we actually delivered over 5,200 fruit trees last season.
Oh my gosh.
So
and how long have you been doing that?
This is my 18th year doing it.
So times roughly 5,000, that's incredible.
Well, here's the thing. And interestingly enough, I just dug up my first year's invoice. I have a bunch of invoices since 1999. The first 2 years, let's see, year one, I bought 100 trees. That was my hobby. Year two, I bought 115 trees, and that was still my hobby. Year three, I bought 115 trees. And that was still my hobby. The minimum order was 100 trees. So a few years into it, we're selling 3 or 4 or 5 or 6 or 800 trees a year. I'm guessing that we've delivered somewhere around 35, 40,000 fruit trees in the Phoenix area. That makes a hell of a difference for people. Plus it's a program that makes a difference for people's tummies.
Yeah.
Right? Yeah. So if anybody's really interested in doing something like this in your area, I would love to teach somebody how to do this for themselves if you're in Idaho or wherever you're at. If you're interested in this model, shoot me an email, greg@urbanfarm.org, and we can talk about, how you can do this in your area, and I'll just teach you how to do it.
Yeah, that's what I was going to say. It's such a good model of, okay, here's a bunch of seeds, throw them in the ground. They'll grow. Here's a bunch of fruit trees. Learn your area, how to get them to grow. And I can't even tell you how, like, the looks we get from my kids' friends when they're like, you can eat that out of your yard? There's like a plum and a peach and a pear and a blackberry. They're like, really? Yeah. I can eat your yard? And my kids are just like, yeah, what are yards for?
Right. Yeah, exactly. Exactly.
Go ahead.
I'm a big proponent of, if you're going to plant something and nurture it, make it edible.
Yeah, I better be able to
support edible, right? Mm-hmm. Have it be a pollinator, or, have it be of support of your space. Oh my God.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah, there's so much we can do. And yeah, to get that model spread throughout other cities and other states, I think that would have such a unique impact on not just people, but the food system.
See, that's the thing. I am a big, big believer. This is my pen. I have to have something in my hand. I am a big, big believer in that urban areas are the solution, or growing food in urban areas is the solution to our food challenge. Because, are you familiar with the term food miles?
Food miles. Oh, like how far the food has to travel to get to your plate.
And exactly. The average food miles in the United States is 12 to 1,500. That means your food is traveling 12 to 1,500 miles to get to you. The environmental impact is huge. But here's what some people don't consider in this. The impact of on the health of the food when it is picked early, because they can't pick it ripe and then they ship it to you. And that goes to eating what's in season, because if you're eating what's in season, you're eating what's ripe, and it's most nutritionally dense when it's ripe.
And that's another example of how we're trying to go uphill from nature, because we plant things out of season. We plant things in environments where they don't want to grow. We put them in soil they don't want to grow in, and then they get bugs, and then we fight the bugs, and then they get disease, and we fight the disease. When really, if we would just go with what nature has to give us, which is an overabundance of food in the right seasons, in the right areas, then we're rolling with what she has to give instead of fighting it.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly.
So one thing you mentioned when you were telling your story that I really loved, and you didn't use the word abundance, but I can't remember the word you used, so I'm going to use that, is you said you really wanted to cultivate abundance mentality. And
Yes.
something that really struck me about that is I teach my students to fight against scarcity mentality. But I also think it's, abundance mentality is the opposite of scarcity mentality. However, fighting against something you don't want is very different from promoting something you do want. And so that really struck me, and I'm going to steal that from you. I hope.
Please use it. Absolutely. Give me credit the first couple of times you use it.
I will.
And it's all yours.
Yeah.
So I don't, this March Against Monsanto, let's go there, right? I love the work that they do, but I don't march against anything. I am always looking to be for something because, being for something, it brings out the happy, it brings out the excited. It's like, how can we transform the world by teaching people about abundance and, about how to grow food in their yard?
Yeah.
So I am always for something, not against anything.
You said prosperity. That's what it was.
Prosperity, yes.
Pro prosperity instead of anti-scarcity.
Yep.
And I just really love that because, my school is a coaching school, and it's all about coaching towards the positive as opposed to coaching away from the negative.
Right.
But I had still been maintaining the whole go against scarcity. So now I get to go towards prosperity. Thanks to you.
Well, it's given me some opportunities along the way because the crew from March Against Monsanto, and I have nothing but great things to say about them. The people that are doing that work, yay, thank you, keep it up. Yeah. It's not my thing, but it gives me an opportunity when I get asked to speak at events like that to say no. And the reason it's no is because I don't do against anything. I'm for. A four is a much lighter, much happier, much forward motion for me. That's my take on it. So
yeah, and it's the quote I like is promote what you love instead of bashing what you hate. We're putting positive energy out there instead of negative. Yeah, I love that. I just love that part of your story because it's so, your explanation of it, that's so permaculture.
What, where lack lives?
No, you're so permaculture because you're like, I'm not going to be against nature. I'm not against anything. I'm going towards
right.
positive. Yeah.
Right. Exactly.
Yeah, and that kind of leads me into another part that I really love about your website, where it says your mission isn't just to create healthier people, it's to create happier people. Mm-hmm. And I think a lot of people might see that and be like, okay, how can gardening create happier people?
Go out and do it for a while and you'll find out.
Yeah. So tell me about that. How does that create more happiness?
Well, so I'll go standing in my front yard during one of my tours. So in the spring, we did a couple of tours, and the excitement for people to see something like this is palpable. Yeah. When you get I started gardening when I was 14, but when I get young people come in and start playing in the garden and growing things, it brings out the happy. I don't even know how to explain it. So, actually, let me tell you a story. I'm a story guy, so let me tell you a story. I'm going to say, so my nephew is 19 years old. So I'm going to say this was 11 years ago when he was 8. His Boy Scout group came, Cub Scout or Boy Scout group, I don't know what, 8 or 9, which one it was, came to the house for a tour. A bunch of 8, 9, 10-year-olds. They're in my yard. They want to see the worm bin. Right? So we're over in the side yard playing with the worm bin. And somebody says to Jeffrey, my nephew, I dare you to eat one.
Of course.
Right? Of course, right? And imagine for the moment, 15, 8, 9-year-olds, 10-year-old kids standing around while my nephew picks up a worm, brushes the dirt off of it, and eats it. And the excitement, the oh my gosh, he just did it. It was palpable in that moment. Mm-hmm. So, I find over and over again that, and I love bringing young kids, because what I'll do is I'll actually pull things up out of the ground, a carrot or oxalis or an edible flower, nasturtiums, fennel. I actually do pick tours where I'll walk through the yard and we'll pick something and I'll say, you know what this is? Try this.
Yeah.
And they're actually eating it. So they're interacting with it with sight, but then they get to taste it as well. And, there's just a certain happy, positive, fun laugh that comes along with that. I get to teach happy is what I get to do.
I love that. And, I think, the reason why there are so many millennials leading or at least participating in this movement and the kids get so excited and everyone's so happy to see all this is it's a reawakening of where we came from, like literally where our bodies come from.
Yep.
Is the soil and the food and the earth. And when we see it happening, there's a part of us that knows, like, that's us and that's what creates us. And it's a reconnection.
Yeah.
And, if connection is the root of wellness, of true wellness, then that's what gardening can give us. And you can have it whether you have 2 acres or 50 acres or a quarter acre or 0.1
my friend Melanie has two fat cats apartment garden is the name of her farm, and she has a patio.
See, yeah.
So I've lived here at the urban farm for 28 years, minus 1. I actually about 5 years ago I moved out of the place because I needed a break from it, and I ended up with a south-facing 200 square foot patio that I ended up growing a lot of food on.
Yeah.
So you don't need a lot of space. You don't need a lot of space.
And even if it's just one thing, like that will still give you the joy. Yeah.
Exactly.
So you have a lot of stuff in Phoenix, and I think maybe some people right now might be getting a little jealous of the area. So do you have things that if people want to connect with you and learn from you online, is there?
Absolutely. So this is where Urban Farm U comes in at. About 8 years ago, I decided to figure out how to put this content online. So we do at least 2 live events every month, one on seed saving. It's our monthly seed saving chat, one on a monthly gardening chat. They're live. We take people's questions. We have 7 different courses that we offer online that you can go check on our website, and they start with a free class. Like our seed saving class starts with a free 1.5-hour long class called Seed Saving Hacked. So, we do lots of online education as well. And you just go to urbanfarm.org, the front page there, and you can sign up for our newsletter.
Awesome. And your podcast too, I'm assuming, is a lot of, you said you have hundreds of episodes. So what sort of topics do you talk about there?
Anything food related, food and health related. Food and health related. I've talked to the most amazing podcast interview I did. It was December 21st of last year when it came out. His name was Brendan Gogren, and he talked about metabolic syndrome. That's when our body turns on itself, right? And what you can do about that. And it's so much about, what you put in.
Yeah.
So I tell people this all the time. There are 3 things in our culture that cause 100% of the disease. And I've had multiple medical doctors say, yeah, Greg, you're right on that. Lack of nutrition in our food, environmental toxins, and stress.
Yeah.
So essentially, that's what I talk about on my podcast.
Yeah. How
to grow your own food, how to put yourself in positions where you avoid these environmental toxins, and how you stress free. And it's primarily around food and growing your own food. I've had nutritionists, you've been on the show. I've had doctors, I've had gardeners, I've had farmers, anybody that's talking food.
Yeah. And so it's really hard for me not to start proselytizing about gardening, because when you mention those 3 things, if you grow your own food, guess what you get? Healthy food, toxin free, and a free stress relief. Man, I'm like, gardening
That's what I'm talking about. That's what I'm talking about.
But I try not to scare people off like the first day of class. It's like, gardening's the answer.
No,
and you get some exercise and vitamin D.
So, here's one more thing, and this is a quick one more thing about, the happy part.
Mm-hmm.
You know, we all have stuff that happens to us in the, you know, on a day-to-day basis. You know, people pass on. My first wife passed away. You know, I've had multiple people that are no longer with us. There's dis-ease that shows up. I have Lyme disease, you know, and that can be brutal, especially this time of year because of the heat. But I have a choice every single day when I get up. Am I going to be happy or not? And recently, I had a cancer scare, and it wasn't. But there are, you know, there was a few weeks in there where, oh my God, I might have cancer. And it took me about 2 weeks to climb out of that hole. Because, you know, you go to a trusted doctor or maybe not a so trusted doctor, and he says, Greg, you know what, you probably have it. And it took me a couple of weeks, but I finally said it. I said to myself, okay, I can choose to live every day, or I can choose to die every day. I can choose to be happy every day, or I can choose to not be happy every day with everything that's going on. Lyme disease is brutal. It really is. And I can choose to be happy or not. Choose. I had this thing happen recently. I go to this place called Lucy's, my favorite coffee house, and it was 7:30 in the morning. And you know, like I said, I'm like this all the time because I choose it. And I'm in line, and there's this grumpy lady in front of me, and I'm effusing happiness. And she turns around and she looks at me and she says, chill out. You shouldn't be so happy so early. She was serious. So you can choose to live your life that way.
Yeah.
Or choose to live your life this way. What do you want to do?
Such an important conversation, because that's, you know, maybe this comes from my Ishmael experience too, but I really like to point out to my students, like, we think we're so superior, but we really only have one superpower, and the superpower we have, we misuse it all the time. The superpower we have is choice. Right. And we get to choose. We get to choose how we use our imagination, and we get to choose which thoughts we serve. Yet usually we choose the negative ones.
Right. And you don't have to do that.
No.
You don't have to do that. You know that monkey mind that we get? Y'all know it. Y'all have a monkey mind out there. It's been 13 years ago now. I had a conversation with the monkey mind. And I said, okay, here's the deal, monkey mind. I don't care what you say anymore. Shut up. Because the work that I am doing on the planet is much more important than anything that you have to say.
Love it.
And I had an interesting thing happen. Last year, so I do a half marathon every year. And I have been doing the PF Chang Rock and Roll Half Marathon in Phoenix since the very first year. So we're 13 years into it. You know, right now I'm coming up on our 15th annual one. So I've done it as of January, I'll have done it 15 times. But last year in December and January, I was having a really, really hard time with the Lyme disease, and it was really kicking my butt. And I verbalized to my sweetie Heidi, I said, you know what? I'm thinking about not doing the half marathon. And this voice roared at me. It basically said, like, heck, you're not. Get your butt out, get trained. This is the monkey mind now, right? Has switched on me. This monkey mind is saying, get your butt out and train. You're going to do that half marathon. I'm getting chills right now. You're going to do that half marathon. So I have successfully had a transformational conversation with the monkey mind. But it takes work. It takes persistence. It takes doing the work and not giving up. You know, a lot of the things that we've talked about. Don't be against things. Be for things. There's abundance out in the world, more than you could ever imagine. Use it. The universe is trying to line up for you to let you use that abundance.
Absolutely.
Use it, because that's what it's there for.
Yeah. And, you know, maybe that's a good prelude to the question I like to always end my podcast with.
Uh-huh.
Is there something that you wish people would ask you about, but they never do? Or something you wish you could tell people about, but you've never had the chance?
Oh, so here's my problem. You told me about this question. Here's my problem with this question. Do you think I'm not going to speak my mind?
Yeah, it's hard for teachers, right? Like we say
Right.
everything.
I'm a storyteller.
Yeah.
I'm a storyteller. If you give me this much space, I will slide in a story about food, about growing your own food, about being happy. So I pretty much say it out in the world.
Yeah.
I pretty much say it, and I'm a big proponent of go out and be happy.
Yeah. Good. Why do you think that's so hard for us to choose?
I think that a piece of it is that people don't think they can actually be that happy. Or what happens if they get happiness? And I have a whole philosophy behind that one, but it's often people don't think they deserve it.
Yeah.
And guess what? I'm going to get up close. Guess what? You deserve to have everything that your heart desires. End of story. Period. Nothing else. You deserve to have what your heart desires. Go out and get it.
Awesome. Well, if that is not the best way to end an interview, I don't know what is. So thank you. Oh my gosh, that hour seriously flew by. Guess that's what happens when you're, talking about happiness and joy.
Yeah,
For
absolutely.
an hour. But thank you so much for joining us. I cannot wait to share this message, not only of spreading, urban farming and gardening and changing the food system from your yard out, but also making sure that not only are we cultivating our yards, but we're also cultivating our joy and our happiness and our choices. So thank you so much.
And thank you so much for letting me share my heart. You can tell I'm passionate about this, and
Absolutely.
I get to do what I love every day, and it changes the global food system.
Amazing, isn't it?
Nice. Yeah.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much.
You bet.
I wish you well. Happy seeding and fruiting and happy growth.
Yeah.
Thank you.